be reading a really fun short story. It's called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and it's written by James Thurber. So I want you to follow along with me, and because there are going to be some parts where I ask you to read to yourself. So anytime I ask you a question, I want you to make sure you write down the answer, and then my last question is going to be the one where I want you to take the most time, okay? So this is The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. "We're going through." The commander's voice was like thin ice breaking. He wore his full dress uniform with the heavily braided white cap pulled down rakishly over one cold gray eye. "We can't make it, sir. It's spoiling for a hurricane, if you ask me." "I'm not asking you, Lieutenant Berg," said the commander. "Throw on the power lights. Rev her up to 8,500. We're going through." The pounding of the cylinders increased. "Tapakada, pakada, 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 pakada." The commander stared at the ice forming on the pilot window. He walked over and twisted a row of complicated dials. "Switch on number 8 auxiliary," he shouted. "Switch on number 8 auxiliary," repeated Lieutenant Berg. "Full strength and number 3 turret," shouted the commander. "Full strength and number 3 turret." The crew, bending to their various tasks in the huge, hurtling 8-engined Navy hydroplane, looked at each other and grinned. "The old man'll get us through," they said to one another. "The old man ain't afraid of hell." All right, so my first question that I want you guys to write the answer to is, where do you think this story is taking place? What do you think the setting is and why? Go ahead and pause me, and when you're ready to keep reading, go ahead and unpause me. "Not so fast! You're driving too fast," said Mrs. Mitty. "What are you driving so fast for?" Said Walter Mitty. He looked at his wife in the seat beside him with shocked astonishment. She seemed grossly unfamiliar, like a strange woman who had yelled at him in a crowd. "You were up to 55, she said. "You know I don't like to go more than 40. You were up to 55. Walter Mitty drove on toward Waterbury in silence, the roaring of the SN-202 through the worst storm in 20 years of Navy flying fading in the remote, intimate airways of his mind. "You're tensed up again," said Mrs. Mitty. "It's one of your days. I wish you'd let Dr. Renshaw look you over." Walter Mitty stopped the car in front of the building where his wife went to have her hair done. "Remember to get those overshoes while I'm having my hair done," she said. "I don't need overshoes," said Mitty. She put her mirror back into her bag. "We've been all through that," she said, getting out of the car. "You're not a young man any longer." He raced the engine a little. "Why don't you wear your gloves? Have you lost your gloves?" Walter Mitty reached in a pocket and brought out the gloves. He put them on, but after she'd turned and gone into the building and he had driven onto a red light, he took them off again. "Pick it up, brother," snapped a cop as the light changed, and Walter hastily pulled on his gloves and lurched ahead. He drove around the streets aimlessly for a time, and then he drove past the hospital on his way to the parking lot. "It's the millionaire banker, Wellington Macmillan," said the pretty nurse. "Yes," said Walter Mitty, removing his gloves slowly. "Who has the case?" "Dr. Renshaw and Dr. Benbow, but there are 2 specialists here, Dr. Remington from New York and Dr. Pritchard Mitford from London. He flew over." A door opened down a long, cool corridor, and Dr. Renshaw came out. He looked distraught and haggard. "Hello, Mitty," he said. "We're having the devil's own time with Macmillan, the millionaire banker and close personal friend of Roosevelt. Obstruosis of the ductal tract, tertiary. Wish you'd take a look at him." "Glad to," said Mitty. In the operating room, there were whispered introductions. "Dr. Remington, Dr. Mitty. Dr. Pritchard Mitford, Dr. Mitty." "I've read your book on streptothricosis," said Pritchard Mitford, shaking hands. "A brilliant performance, sir." "Thank you," said Walter Mitty. Didn't know you were in the States, Mitty," grumbled Remington. "Coles to Newcastle, bringing Mitford and me up here for a tertiary." "You're very kind," said Mitty. A huge, complicated machine connected to the operating table with many tubes and wires began at this moment to go pocketa, pocketa, pocketa. "The new anesthetizer is giving way," shouted an intern. "There is no one in the East who knows how to fix it." "Quiet, man," said Mitty in a low, cool voice. He sprang to the machine, which was now going pocketa, pocketa, queep, pocketa, queep. He began fingering delicately a row of glistening dials. "Give me a fountain pen," he snapped. Someone handed him a fountain pen. He pulled a faulty piston out of the machine and inserted the pin in its place. "That will hold for 10 minutes, he said. "Get on with the operation." A nurse hurried over and whispered to Renshaw, and Mitty saw the man turn pale. Choreopsis has set in, said Renshaw nervously. If you would take over, Mitty? Mitty looked at him and at the craven figure of Bimbo who drank and at the grave, uncertain faces of the two great specialists. If you wish, he said. They slipped a white gown on him. He adjusted a mask and drew on thin gloves. He adjusted a mask and drew on thin gloves. Nurse handed him shining. All right, next question. What do you notice about Walter Mitty in this section? Make sure you answer like how you know these things. Pause me, and when you're ready to keep going, press play. All right. Back it up, Mac. Look out for that Buick. Walter Mitty jammed on the brakes. Wrong lane, Mac, said the parking lot attendant, looking at Mitty closely. Gee, yeah, muttered Mitty. He began cautiously to back out of the lane marked exit only. Leave her sit there, said the attendant. I'll put her away. Mitty got out of the car. Hey, better leave the key. Oh, said Mitty, handing the man the ignition key. The attendant vaulted into the car, backed it up with insolent skill, and put it where it belonged. All right, my next question is, what did you notice about Mitty in that paragraph? Pause me, and when you're ready to go, press play. Okay, what I want you guys to do is to read the next 2 paragraphs on your own. Pause me, and when you've read those 2 paragraphs, press play. All right, so we have just read paragraphs 8 and 9. I want you to pause and answer this question. What do you notice about Walter's relationship with his wife? Pause me, and when you're ready to go, press play. Okay, I want you to go ahead and read this next paragraph, the one that starts with ... Perhaps this will refresh your memory. I want you to read that paragraph on your own, and it goes to, you miserable cur, ... Pause me, and when you're done with that paragraph, press play. Okay, so the ... at the beginning of and end of that paragraph are called ellipses. And what I want you to think about is, what did the ellipses in this story mean? And if you're not sure, I want you to look back through, okay? Once you figured it out, you can unpause me. So pause me right now, and once you figured it out, unpause me. Okay, so for those of you who didn't figure it out, the ... or the ellipses in this story are when Walter Mitty is having a daydream. So whenever you see the ellipses, it means that he is kind of making it up in his mind. It's not his real life, okay? So what I want you to do is go ahead and read the next 2 paragraphs, starting with Puppy Biscuit and going to Ruined Streets. Pause me, and when you've read those 2 paragraphs, press play. Okay, so now that we know the difference between his real life and his daydreams, I want you to take some time to analyze that difference. So write this answer down. How is Mitty's behavior different in real life than in his daydreams? Okay. Pause me, and when you finish that answer, I want you to go ahead and press play. Okay, so I want you to take some time to read his next daydream, which goes from paragraph 13, the cannonading, through, I guess that's all one paragraph, to cheerio, he said. And actually, I want you to read the next paragraph too, to where it says, when I get you home, she said. Pause me, and when you're ready to keep going, press play. All right, paragraph 15 is where we're going to start. They went out through the revolving doors that made a faintly derisive whistling sound when you pushed them. It was 2 blocks to the parking lot. At the drugstore on the corner, she said, wait here for me. I forgot something. I won't be a minute. She was more than a minute. Walter Mitty lighted a cigarette. It began to rain with sleet in it. He stood up against the wall of the drugstore, smoking. He put his shoulders back and his heels together. To hell with the handkerchief, said Walter Mitty scornfully. He took one last drag on his cigarette and snapped it away. Then, with that faint, fleeting smile playing about his lips, he faced the firing squad, erect and motionless, proud and disdainful. Walter Mitty, the undefeated, inscrutable to the last. All right, that's the end of the story. So I've got a couple questions that I want you guys to think about. What is happening in his last daydream? And what does that tell you about Walter Mitty's life? That's the first question. All right, the next question is on this last page especially, what contrast or difference is shown between Walter's point of view and Mrs. Mitty's point of view? Pause me, then keep going. All right, we're going to work with Walter Mitty again tomorrow. So make sure you keep up with this text and have a wonderful rest of your day.